I'm really excited to be here. Gene, you're here? Oh, hi. My name is John Allspaw, and I've got so much to talk about today. This is probably one of my most favorite it's my favorite topic. So my goal this morning is to pique your curiosity, get you to think about something that we usually take for granted. I think what we know from research of people working in high-tempo, complex domains, what it might mean for the topics explored at this conference, and convince you that it's critically important that we get this right and make some real progress here. And progress meaning supporting people in doing the work that you're all doing. I believe the stakes are very, very high, scarily high, and I think that we're actually behind. I am going to reference some papers and all that sort of stuff. Don't worry, I'm going to put a GitHub with a repo with some like the references, and there won't be any sort of academic papers behind paywalls or anything that sort of thing. As Jason was saying, the last time I gave a talk at Monitorama was the first talk at the first Monitorama, and I really had a plan. My colleague Dave Woods says that you can't claim that you are a scientific discipline if you can't admit when you've got some things wrong in the past. And I thought, well, that's really great. I can revisit some of the things that I really didn't know what I was talking about back then, and I'll add that at the beginning of the thing. And then I realized at some point last night, we're not going to have time enough to go through all of that. So I'll have to probably put some of that up on my slides at the end when I share them. So a quick sort of thought exercise. Some people have heard this question from me before. I want you to all pretend that at your companies tomorrow, okay, thought exercise, no engineers are going to touch, you're going to spend all day doing nothing. Hands off keyboards, right? Stop making any changes to the system, right? No hands on keyboards, no responding to alerts, no one touches anything. Okay. Now I want you to raise your hand if you believe wholeheartedly that your systems will be running a day later. Okay? I want you to keep your hands up if they're still running the same health, everything, 3 days later. 5 days later. A week later. I want to talk to you later. What makes that exercise interesting is that it means that you are doing something. You are the reasons why these things are working. You are continually, right now, you are avoiding incidents. The question is, what are you doing? So I want to start with a collection of terms that we're going to hear a great deal about over the next couple of days. I want you to consider that these are part of a broader story, right? That these things don't do anything by themselves, but are for people to work with to help them, right? And we tend to talk a lot more about what's inside this circle here than what's outside of that circle, but largely that's because we don't really have a lot of language, and we're not really used to that sort of thing in our field. And it's what's outside the circle that I want to bring your attention to. First, I want to give you some context for this topic. And so, taking human performance seriously, it's kind of a dramatic title, right? I certainly intend it to be, and so I want to start with a little bit of a detour, just back up to about somewhere between World War II and about 40 years. But it's about a span of 40 years. And without going into too much detail, I'm going to sort of sum up what were sort of core beliefs, core thoughts, both in sort of practice in a lot of sort of complex domains, work environments, as well as what research and what science believed was going on in those environments. And the first belief is that safety could be encoded in technology, right? In the design, you can make a thing, you can make it unsafe, and you can make it safe. It's within the design is where safety sits. Another belief was that accidents could be avoided by having more automation. In the middle of the century, this was a huge boon for almost every industry. Automation was this thing that, that just kept accelerating, and our ability to get automation to do things for us was sort of outpaced. This notion that procedures could be specified, and that operators are really left with following the procedures to get work done. And so what you do is you have this design, we're going to design this safe system for all of the things that automation and the technology can't do. What we're going to do is we're going to put operators in this situation. We're going to empower them, or whatever, insert whatever word you in here, with procedures to help guide them when things are so that they can make adjustments. And a lot of this sits on this foundation of something that sort of unfortunately sits still around today, this idea that there's a concrete list of activities or tasks that humans are better at, and tasks and abilities that machines or computers or software are better at. And that's your design sort of thing. And this persisted for about 40 years, these beliefs, until March 28th, 1979. Anybody have a guess what happened on that date? 3 Mile Island. It is really difficult. I honestly cannot overstate how important this event was. Some of you might be watching. There's a miniseries on Chernobyl on HBO. My hope is that that miniseries will get more people to look at more seminal events. 3 Mile Island happened in Pennsylvania. We don't have a lot of time to go into it right now. Suffice to say that it was really pivotal on a number of different levels. But I'm hoping the miniseries will get people to think about the 7 years before Chernobyl. And it led us with these new beliefs. It really turned the field of human factors, the study of work, the study, and certainly in the nuclear industry, on its head in the United States. It led us some contradictory beliefs. One is that automation, while it's necessary in modern systems, also introduces new forms of challenges and risk. That rules and procedures are always under-specified. There are no safe procedures. They can't guarantee safety. They have to be interpreted. And guess who interprets them? People. That events in these environments will require operators to make decisions and take actions that cannot be pre-specified, and that the methods that we had been using, a lot of the statistical and accounting, the probabilistic risk assessments and human reliability analyses, and the counting of errors and mistakes and issues, the counting of incidents, the gathering and making statistics of averages between events or the length of events, and all of that came to our fraught. Right, and this is what a myriad of different disciplines had to face. Perhaps the most important sort of overarching wake-up call was that we thought we knew about human contributions. What we thought we knew in successful work in complex domains was wrong. What we thought we knew about it, we thought we really did. And 3 Mile Island was sort of like a Titanic. Right? It couldn't have seen what it saw. And so this existential crisis sort of mixed a little bit with, in the 1980s, there was something called artificial intelligence. It was huge. It was really big. Led us to sort of the creation of the field of cognitive systems engineering and later resilience engineering. And so what do I mean by this, taking human performance seriously? This is what 3 Mile Island told us, which is that you can't just put operators in these scenarios and expect that the design, the engineering, the technical capabilities will take care of all of the sort of the variation, all of the weird things. It means finding people who are, understanding human performance means finding people who are mired in the nitty-gritty of the work and understand how they cope with complexity normally and use that to inform how we can better support them. So by human performance being cognitive performance, accidents don't happen nearly as often as they should, right? Given how complex our systems are, they should be breaking all the time. The fact is they don't. And people are the reason why they are making active effort to keep things working, and they're continually avoiding accidents. But we don't pay a lot of attention to that because we just call that normal work, right? The challenge is, what are people actually doing? People know more than they can tell because they have experience, and they can do a lot more than machines. So we study cognitive work by studying incidents. And it's not just because incidents have this attention on them, although that's really helpful. Incidents have this really awesome part. If you're someone who wants to study cognitive processes, you know the stuff that goes on up here, which you can't measure or ask. You can't just ask somebody, what are you thinking? You can't get. We don't have privileged access to our own cognition. We have to triangulate it. So we have to be able to make inferences about what is happening for people. Incidents wipe away things that don't matter. We've got a greater confidence of where people's attention is. Oh, so who do I mean by we? I just figured I'd tell you. So what I mean by we in this talk is a number of different organizations, some sort of industry and commercial, and some research-based and academic. That's not really important right now. Gary Klein said it this way about incidents, that incidents, these non-routine challenging events, are good to study because these tough cases have the greatest potential for uncovering elements of expertise and related cognitive phenomena. And without going into too much detail as well, there are sort of family of methods, techniques, approaches, that sort of thing. By the way, experience with these methods and approaches, vendors in the room, this is the expertise that you should be hiring for when you hire researchers. You're hiring researchers, right? So here's some of the things we find when we study incidents. We find people who bring different contexts and knowledge and expertise to the incident. People don't show up blank, right? We find people who come into an incident with knowledge about what's happening in the world. Maybe there's an election happening, or maybe there's some geopolitical events that may affect how they work through the incident. So outside, external. Of course, their knowledge and observations about their tools, alerts they might get, history of alerts that they've gotten. They know about recent changes in existing technology. They've got their time series data. They might have some knowledge about new dependencies. Oh, we're putting this new thing in. Everybody has a legacy migration happening all the time, right? They have some memory, some working memory of what's been investigated thus far, the status of other ongoing work. Interestingly, observations that they make can be informed by observations that other people relay to them. Hypotheses they make can be informed by just overhearing hypotheses that other people have made. They're looking at logs. They're taking into account the time of year, the day of year, the time of day, Cyber Monday, tax day. They also know who's on vacation. Who can they call upon? Who's available? Who might be available? So you'll note that only a few of these represented here are part of what was traditionally known as in the area of monitoring. A lot of this other stuff is stuff that people are showing up with, and it doesn't somehow sit separate in their mind. So Gary Klein, Rebecca Plisk, Beth Crandall, and Dave Woods, on the topic of problem detection, make a distinction between problem detection and problem identification. Sometimes they're coincident, sometimes they're not. And this is something really interesting. They say cues that you're getting from the system are not primitive events. They're constructions generated by people trying to understand situations. That they're only objective in a limited sense. Rather, the knowledge and expectancies a person will determine what counts as a cue and whether it'll be noticed. It's pretty wild. So people show up, and this context along with all of their other colleagues. We always see multiple people in incidents, each with their different perspectives. Layer on top of this that they have different tenure, experience at the organization, different domain expertise, past experiences, and all of these things can vary. When things go well, they're able to not have some perfectly aligned, and we don't see this, their ability to work through an incident is critically dependent on their ability to compare and contrast their mental models and understandings of what's happening now, what has happened in the past, what's possibly happening in the future. And these hypotheses can have sort of, certainly not a mirroring effect, but certainly influencing in a really sort of organic way. Things like what it is that's happening, what can and what can't be done about it, what can be done to stem the bleeding or reduce the blast radius, or fix it outright. Also, who has authority? They have context about who has authority to make particular changes or take actions. What are the things that you shouldn't try? So we see these multiple threads of activity, right? These responses to incidents are, when we look really closely, they're active, they're multidimensional, they're messy. And so because there's time pressure and high consequences, all the incidents that we've studied in a myriad of different companies, and in some cases, a myriad of different domains, the time pressure and escalating consequences, the consequences for getting it right, or perhaps not getting it right soon enough, or get it right enough, makes for a really squishy, sort of really complicated set of interactions and dynamics. I'm going to assert here that this isn't, we're not talking about debugging or troubleshooting. I think that these are words that don't capture, they don't sufficiently capture the activities and qualities of the scenarios I just described. One of the things that I wanted to get out to this crowd is that people in incidents will pursue what they think will be productive. What do I mean by that? They'll look at data they think will be helpful, and they won't look at data they don't think will be helpful. Right? They'll use tools that they believe will help them solve the problem, and they won't use tools that they don't think will be helpful. Right? All options are on the table. Let me show you what we don't see. What we don't see when we study incidents in detail, we don't see people standing on principles. Nope. I mean, I could SSH into one of the servers, manually, and I might find something helpful by doing it, but no, it's 2019. We shouldn't have to do that. So therefore, you can do it if you want, but I'm definitely not doing that. Blah, 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 mumble, mumble, something about cattle and pets and blah. We don't see this happening. Or as one of my favorite characters, General Behringer from the 1983 major motion picture War Games, put it, "God damn it, I'd piss on a spark plug if I thought it'd do any good." I've been practicing that quote. People will pursue what they think will be productive. Who are these people? What are the roles they have? How do they do this work? And what is productive? We like to think of incidents and incident stories as a diagnostic mystery. More often than not, that's the thing that makes them compelling. It's as if it's a search or a hunt for some eureka piece or some eureka part, right? Because it has the 3-act structure. It makes it look like a mystery. That's not what real incidents, sometimes that's what incidents look like, but there's a boatload of incidents that do not look like that. And sometimes some of the most difficult incidents are the ones that you know what's happening almost immediately, and you know exactly what to do about it almost immediately. The challenges come in doing the thing that you need to do, or getting permission to do the thing that you need to do, or realizing halfway through the thing that you needed to do that it needed this other thing. These don't make, Showtime special sort of compelling dramas, but it is what real incidents look like. So what does this research look like? So imagine we had data about an incident's progression. Like a lot of data. And imagine that we could represent visually, I realize you can't see this. We represent visually the sort of the functional aspects of the cognitive work of the coordination between team members. And let's say we layer sort of the signals that they receive and sometimes relay to each other, the interventions that they make in turn and reaction and response to those, the tentative and evolving hypotheses that tend to morph over time as new information comes in, as some new information gets invalidated or validated, generated collectively, until some of those move into concrete plans or actions. What I've sort of shown you up there is only one of 4 different cases examined via an approach called cognitive process tracing. It's part of the family of cognitive task analysis. In a master's thesis published this past spring by one of my colleagues, Marissa Grayson. And the title is Approaching Overload, Diagnosis and Response to Anomalies in Complex and Automated Production Software Systems. Who thinks that's a cool title? Right. If one of you at the end of this talk goes and reads it, then I'll be happy. So the point that I want to make here is that monitoring and what we refer to as observability or monitoring, all of the topics that we hear here, that we talk about here at this conference, are inextricably coupled with other activities, right? And that we can better support engineers by taking this into account. And I don't think that we do this well at the moment. So therefore, what can we do? I think you should consider building expertise inside your organization to do incident analysis. And I don't mean template-driven postmortems. I mean expand on the current directions. There are more and more people who are talking about what deep incident analysis looks like. A lot of it looks like qualitative research methods. Develop this deeper practice and build a cadre, build a community inside your organization, and recognize those people who do this really well as resources, as significant resources, as assets in your organization, and push them to engage with others outside of the organization. When you do an incident analysis, ask better questions, develop better questions. How do people improvise new tools? What tricks do some people use, especially when it comes to understanding systems or sort of inputs and outputs of services that they don't have intimate familiarity with? Are there any sources of data that people regularly dismiss or are suspicious of? You have them, but you don't give them a lot of credence. Answers to these questions can be hugely informative and lead you to even better questions. I'd suggest that you select a few incidents for closer looks. Even a few incidents, really middling incidents, and middling meaning not particularly severe ones. Actually, high-value, significant incidents are not good for getting good at incident analysis. Why? Because they tend to get a lot of management and executive scrutiny, a lot of stakeholder, regulatory in some cases, attention, and it can make that very, very difficult. Find cases that have elements of surprise, uncertainty, ambiguity. These are the ones that are likely to have stuff that you can reveal things that people otherwise wouldn't know. Try avoid filing off the rough edges. When you find a case where there's a myriad of people who have really contrasting understandings, and I mean really, wait, no, it didn't happen this way, it happened this way. No, it happened this way, it happened this way. Disagreements are data. Disagreements is probably one of the most fruitful pieces of data that you can have about an incident. You want to try not to build some sort of single coherent. If the case makes sense, you did it wrong. I'd suggest that you build some or adjust the tooling to capture data about the incident itself, right? Even a small amount of effort, chat logs, transcripts of video calls, database. What are things that people, what are commands that people ran? What are graphs that people looked at? Putting this together is going to be really fruitful, especially those that turned out to be unhelpful. You want to find those commands that all of those sort of lines of activity, those hypotheses that didn't pan out, right? It can be really especially valuable to identify and characterize the ultimately useless trips down the rabbit hole. Why? Because people go down the rabbit hole for good reasons. It's because it usually works. Make company-wide postmortem sessions regular events. They are unplanned investments. Incidents are an investment that you accidentally made, right? It's up to you to get a return on that. Milk this incident, milk this opportunity for everything that you can. So I've got some suggestions for vendors, for people who make tools that support engineers. Hire and retain expertise to do qualitative research. This is probably the most important thing that you could possibly do. And dog fooding is not sufficient. I get that you have engineers in-house. I get that you use your tool to use your tool and to build your tool. I get it. It's not sufficient. You need to observe, understand, study how real engineers outside your company use your tool, because they use tools alongside your tool that you do not have. They have tips and tricks and workarounds that they don't even know they're doing because your tool doesn't have it. I would really, really be happy if user research was a fully funded activity in monitoring and observability funding companies. Doing research on supporting work in complex domains already exists. All of the papers that I will link to and a lot of the things that are happening in this renewed interest in human factors and resilience engineering and cognitive systems engineering are concepts that have been in place for a long time. Thankfully, with efforts like Papers We Love and some of us who are crazy enough to go get advanced degrees can help bridge this gap for people who are not going to get advanced degrees. If you do this as a vendor, it will prove to be a competitive advantage, right? You're leaving money on the table if you don't. There are techniques for visualizations, alert design, process controls that are literally waiting for you to implement. P.S. Two-dimensional Cartesian XY plots are not the only way to display time series data. Go get it, people. So here's my summary. Understanding cognitive work in software engineering and operations is critically important. I don't know what 3 Mile Island looks like in this community, but I know that it hasn't happened yet, and my guess is that it will. Doing this well, supporting work, understanding what's been discovered in this field will mean learning a little bit new language and terminology, some new concepts, paradigms, practices. Some of these might be controversial. Some of them might be pretty unintuitive. This is going to have to be, if we're going to make progress, going to have to be driven. It can't just be research and academia. These fields aren't do it in a grad school lab fields anyway. It's not like math or psychology. You have to put your boots on. Your sleeves have to be rolled up. It's going to happen with industry and industry practitioners and research in academia. And like I said, if you pay attention, if you're a vendor, it will be a competitive advantage. So I'm going to leave you with this. A quote from Lisanne Bainbridge. And if you haven't read Lisanne Bainbridge's paper from 1983, The Ironies of Automation, then you should not be allowed to come back to Monitorama until you have. She said this: the irony that the more advanced a control system is, so the more crucial may be the contribution of the human operator. That's my talk.